November 25th, 1963. Washington, D.C. 10:30 a.m. John F. Kennedy's shattered body hasn't even been lowered into the ground at Arlington National Cemetery. The nation is completely paralyzed by grief, glued to the flickering screens of their television sets. But inside the heavily guarded walls of the Department of Justice, grief has already been replaced by cold, calculated, bureaucratic panic. Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach sits at his desk and begins to type a document, a memo that will officially and permanently rewrite American history before the first genuine homicide investigation can even begin. This is not a speculative theory. This is the infamous Katzenbach Memo, a radioactive document that establishes 5 terrifying red flags right out of the gate. Flag number 1. Katzenbach states that the public must be immediately satisfied that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole assassin. Flag number 2. He dictates this definitive narrative less than 72 hours after the Dallas shooting, before any forensic autopsy report is finalized. Flag number 3. He clearly outlines the urgent need to suppress intelligence, pointing to a broader conspiracy. Flag number 4. He commands the FBI to immediately halt any probing field investigations that contradict this lone gunman theory. And flag number 5. He proposes the creation of a presidential commission, not to uncover the dangerous truth, but to exclusively validate this predetermined conclusion. This single piece of paper became the blueprint for the greatest institutional cover-up of the 20th century. A wall of state-sponsored silence designed to protect the intelligence apparatus rather than seek justice. If you want to understand the darkest, most disturbing allegations hidden within the National Archives, hit that like button right now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and prepare yourself, because today we are going to tear down the Katzenbach wall brick by concrete brick. To grasp the magnitude of the Katzenbach wall, look at the speed of its construction. By November 24th, Oswald was silenced by a mobster in the Dallas police basement. Standard procedure requires a forensic sweep, but the DOJ ignored eyewitnesses reporting shots from the grassy knoll. Surgeons at Parkland noted a throat wound appearing as an entry point, meaning a front shooter. But the DOJ was focused on containment, not forensic reality. They feared an international incident and a catastrophic intelligence failure. The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have Confederates, and that he would have been convicted at trial. These were Katzenbach's exact words. He didn't want proof. He wanted the public to be psychologically satisfied. The FBI under Hoover was marshaled into line. All threads leading to intelligence operations, Cuban exiles, or mafia bosses were severed. Complexities of ballistics and trajectory angles were swept under a rug. In less than 3 days, the reality of a crossfire was reduced to the narrative of a single man with a cheap rifle. The chain of command didn't solve a crime. They engineered a politically viable reality. The Katzenbach Memo was the foundational cornerstone. What followed was the systematic construction of a massive paper wall, a deliberate obstruction of justice at the highest levels of government. During those chaotic first 72 hours, evidence wasn't just ignored, it was actively sanitized and destroyed. The presidential limousine, a rolling crime scene drenched in forensic reality, was immediately sent back to Ohio, washed with hot water, and rebuilt. Why destroy a pristine murder scene before bullets could be extracted? Because the brutal reality inside that vehicle wouldn't match the lone shooter narrative Katzenbach mandated. In the shadowy corridors of Washington, an unspoken, terrifying consensus formed among frightened technocrats. They stared into the geopolitical abyss and made a cold-blooded decision. If the public believed a foreign power or intelligence agencies had a hand in this, The resulting demand for retaliation could trigger a thermonuclear holocaust. We must offer a closed, isolated narrative. It was the ultimate, horrifying zero-sum game. Either Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole architect of the crime of the century, or the world was hurtling toward World War III. They chose to sacrifice the uncomfortable truth for global stability. Reports of a mysterious second shooter simply vanished from files. Men who witnessed multiple gunmen found themselves aggressively intimidated by agents. The investigative machinery of the nation was weaponized against its own citizens to enforce a predetermined verdict. The memo didn't just close the case, it signed the death warrant for the absolute truth. The paper wall was fully cemented, and absolutely no one was allowed to peek behind its fragile, devastating lies. The true tragedy of the Katzenbach wall wasn't just the suppression of forensic evidence. It was the silent betrayal within the Department of Justice itself. Nicholas Katzenbach wasn't operating in a vacuum. His superior, the acting Attorney General, was Robert F. Kennedy, the murdered president's own brother. While Robert was incapacitated by shock and grief, Katzenbach seized total operational control of the federal investigative apparatus. Behind closed doors, an unspoken war was escalating. Robert Kennedy, known for his relentless mentality against organized crime, secretly suspected a domestic conspiracy from day one. He repeatedly asked aides if the CIA or the Mafia had orchestrated the Dallas execution. But Katzenbach wasn't hunting for assassins. He was shutting down the hunt. The November 25th memo entirely bypassed the Attorney General's legitimate suspicions. Instead, Katzenbach coordinated with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, a man whom Robert Kennedy notoriously despised, to permanently cement the lone gunman theory into federal law. It was an unprecedented, highly calculated bureaucratic coup. By the time Robert Kennedy realized a massive, impenetrable paper wall had been erected around his brother's murder, it was too late to tear it down. The Department of Justice had investigated itself, permanently sealed the vital records, and locked away the truth. Katzenbach's radioactive memo ensured that any dissenting agent would immediately be labeled a radical conspiracy theorist, weaponizing the legal system against the very justice it was sworn to uphold. More than 60 years have passed since the violent afternoon in Dealey Plaza, yet the legacy of the Katzenbach wall remains unbroken. Every investigation, from the Warren Commission to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, was forced to operate within the narrow parameters established by that single memo on November 25, 1963. The premise was never to ask who actually killed the president, but only to prove that Lee Harvey Oswald did it alone. Crucial documents remain redacted or locked away, protected by the institutional panic that Katzenbach weaponized. So, we are left with a terrifying question. If the highest law enforcement officials were willing to fabricate a historical narrative within 72 hours simply to maintain stability, what else have they buried? How far would the government go to maintain the illusion of control? We may never have all the exact pieces, but the existence of the Katzenbach memo proves the cover-up was real and coordinated. If this deep dive changed how you view history, subscribe and hit the like button. Drop a comment and tell me what you think the government is still hiding today. Until next time, remember, the official story is almost never the entire truth. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning the narrative.